Welcome, everybody. Great to see everybody for another That Word Chat. I'm very happy to see again Amanda Jones, the author of That Librarian, The Fight Against Book Banning in America. This is the second time we've had a librarian on the show, and we love librarians. So we're going to have a nice chat with her. Amanda has been a teacher and librarian for 23 years. She was the 2021 school, sorry, I can't see, School Library Journal Co-Librarian of the Year for 2021. She was the Library Journal Mover and Shaker for 2021. And she was a 2020 Louisiana School Librarian of the Year. So she's had, she has the creds as a librarian. Things changed a bit in 2022. It was kind of a banner year. We'll ask her whether whether for good or for ill. She's also, I should say, the president of the Louisiana Association of School Librarians. And the book is That Librarian, The Fight Against Book Banning in America. I saw Amanda when she came to speak to my local library, the Bexley Library, a couple of months ago, and I think that was your first stop on after the book came out. I believe, was it your first event?
Very first out of state event. So yes.
Out of state, yeah. Okay, how did you like Bexley, Ohio?
Oh, I loved it. It was
Yeah.
fantastic.
Oh, good. You have to say that. But I guess I posed the question in the intro is, whether that was a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, I think it's been, we'll ask you what happened, but it's been the book can be difficult to read at some time because it's triggering. I mean, there's a lot of, you get a sense of the anger and you feel the anger yourself. Do you regret what happened that day?
I don't regret going to speak, and I don't
Hmm.
regret any of my actions since then.
Yeah,
But I regret. I mean, no, I don't regret it because it's not fun being the target of
yeah,
harassment, and it's still ongoing. But I wouldn't change anything
right,
that I have done. So no.
right. Just in a nutshell, bring us up to speed. Tell us what transpired. You went to a not your school library, but a local school board meeting to speak out.
So I'm a school librarian, but I went and spoke at my public library. So we are parishes, not counties. And so I went and spoke at our local public library systems, library board of control meeting as a resident. I've lived here my entire life in this small town, and there were going to be some censorship attempts. And so I went and spoke about the dangers of censorship and the harmful effects. And I quoted like the Trevor Project and the American Library Association, and that's all I did. I just gave a speech,
Yeah,
and I was targeted by, and so a lot of other people spoke too at the same meeting and said the same thing I did. But I was targeted by particularly two men, and then everyone else piled on. And I was some men had shared some memes saying that I advocate the teaching of sex acts to children, and that I give pornography and erotica to 6-year-olds, which had nothing to do with my speech. And it's just been harassment for 2.5 years ever since.
and the interesting thing is the piling on. It's the and social media gives people an avenue to do this, but two men are responsible, you say, but then others. I mean, the claims were ridiculous that a school librarian advocates teaching sex acts to young people. What was that I guess I'm making a statement here, and that was the most shocking thing to me was that people don't just look at that and see it for what it is and say this is garbage and let's be real.
Yeah, no, it's and what the sad thing about our reality nowadays is that people believe everything they see on social media.
Mhm.
So people I've known my entire life because it's a very small town. Everybody in my town saw it, and it was circulated hundreds and thousands of times. And people that I've grown up and known my entire life were saying these awful things about me. And then people I didn't know were saying things like I needed to be purged and slapped and the awful names I was called. And it's not just online, they do these in person as well in my town. Not the two men that originated it haven't,
Hmm.
they ignore me in public, but
Yeah.
um, the other people, like I get called every time I go to speak. I still go and speak at our library board of control meetings, and I get called just all sorts of names and told I'm going to hell, and um,
Is
by
it,
people I've known my whole life.
yeah. So I mean, and not necessarily people who are part of a movement, but just people who maybe subscribe to a certain belief system.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's sort of reminded me of the scene from Beauty and the Beast where Gaston is like, "We've got to kill the beast," and then everybody has the pitchforks and they go to storm the castle, and that's what they're doing. And I never mentioned where I worked, but they did, and
Yeah.
they have since posted. They've posted my home address online, and it's just
Right.
it's been a journey.
Right. Yeah. And you said we were talking a little bit before that it's ongoing. That it's not. I mean, that's this. I mean, this is. It's hard for me to fathom, but that people would feel like this is a good fight to have, and so people are still. You're still getting harassment.
Yes, and part of that is not from the original speech. It's continued harassment because I wasn't silent about their harassment.
Yeah.
I founded a library alliance, a community alliance for our public library within our community, and we fight back against censorship and lies that are being told about our library. So I joined I created an organization that pushes back against them. So that's why I'm still continued to be
Hmm.
harassed. And then I also am a co-founder of Louisiana Citizens Against Censorship, and we fight these same people in the legislature and try to we fight against anti-library and anti-book laws in the Louisiana legislature. So it's had I been quiet, it probably would have gone away, but I refuse to be quiet, and so I keep speaking out, and so that's why they continue to harass me.
Yeah. Let me ask you something that you may not. Well, you may not be able to answer this, but you may, having sort of, you've probably thought many, many times and spent a lot of time thinking, what motivates these people? Um, what motivates these people?
Hate. Hate. I
Yeah.
mean, that's what hate and anger. And I've thought a lot about that. Where I live is a very small town. There's a lot of low income. There's a lot of low literacy rates, high foster care, high drug addiction, and people are unhappy in their lives.
Hmm.
And they're just looking to lash out. And so I'm just one of the targets. And I am in a current lawsuit against the two men, so that
Yeah.
motivates them to keep going too, because I
Sure.
just refuse to back off.
Right. Let's talk about that. So the lawsuit, is that a practical avenue for dealing with it?
I would not recommend it to anyone else. I am glad I did. But it's something that it's a lot of money.
Mm.
So, I have a GoFundMe, so I'm fine, but it's not cheap. And then the emotional toll is not great. But I tell people because a lot of people ask me that, and I'm like, this is if you choose to file suit, you're looking at years of your life that you're going to be fighting this, and it's very expensive. And ultimately, my suit it's headed to it's in the Louisiana Supreme Court right now. And if I ultimately lose, not only do I pay mine, I have to pay their court costs too. And I've already spent
Yeah.
60,000 just on myself. So I will have to pay these two men's,
Mm.
so I don't recommend that. But I heard author Samira Ahmed say that we should use our power and privilege for purpose. And so I am afforded privilege and I do have a platform. And so I am in a position where I'm able to fight back. And so I recognize that not everybody can. So I'm doing it for myself, but kind of also doing it for others to hopefully set a precedent in the court system.
Yeah. Are the courts in Louisiana friendly to, and let me, there's maybe a little bit of a leading question, but as a person with a background in journalism, I'm always a little bit cautious about libel laws and slander laws being applied in sort of in ways that can shut down speech. I mean, the counter argument is that by suing people who are saying that these people are simply exercising their right to be jerks, and we should let them do that. So has that been what's been the reaction of the courts?
Well, the local elected official, local elected judge in our small community dismissed the case. And so it went to the First Circuit Court of Appeals, and they were split 2-1 with a jurisdictional technicality. So that's why we're headed to the Louisiana Supreme Court. But because that's the argument that they say, I'm trying to shut down their free speech. Free speech is one thing, but repeatedly calling, insinuating that I am breaking the law and doing criminal activities with children is not acceptable. That's just not acceptable. That's not free speech. So
right. And there's of course the irony there of saying it's anti-free speech when their purpose is to get books out of the library, prevent people from looking at certain books. And let's get into that. What books are we talking about here?
Well, when I first went to go speak, there was not the reason I went to go speak was because a neighboring extremist group that had been detrimental to the defunding or the cost of millions in funding to our neighboring library system. They were commenting in our local pages that everyone needed to be at the library board. And so that's why I went and I looked at the agenda. It said content and signage, and it was in July of 2022, right after Pride Month. So I figured it was about a Pride display. And so in my speech, I was like, I hope this is not where this is headed. But they did produce a list, and they have since produced lists, and it's the usual books that are challenged and banned. We've had Pride Puppy challenged, Queerfully and Wonderfully Made, several Ellen Hopkins books, Sarah J. Maas. Originally the majority of the books they were challenging were books by authors or with characters from the LGBTQ plus community. And we kept calling them out on that. So now they don't challenge books with LGBTQ plus characters. They challenge like Ellen Hopkins and Sarah J. Maas, but it's the same. It's the same books all across that are being challenged all across the United States.
Yeah. Is it mostly an anti-LGBTQ?
Oh, absolutely.
movement?
Yes. Absolutely. They repeatedly say at library board meetings or in the legislature or at our parish council governance meetings that the library should be a Christian institution, and it should be, they're going to restore the library to its righteous purpose. And they quote the Bible a lot, and they they like to talk about gender mutilation and gender ideology and things like that don't make sense and have nothing to do with the books that they're it's a lot of word salad that they say. It doesn't make sense. And and my counter argument at every single meeting is that they'll say, the library should not represent minorities, is what was said by one of our library board of control members. And so I said, the library should represent everyone in the community because everyone pays taxes and everyone deserves to see themselves and their families represented on the books of the shelves in our community because it's all of our community.
Yeah.
They don't like that.
Right.
I'm woke.
Well,
They said I'm woke.
Yeah. Yeah. I suppose that is the bigger thing that we're seeing played out in in 1,000 different ways. And this idea that the majority or the people in power don't want to give up power. And I keep making statements. I should be asking more questions, but it's just, it's a very near and dear to my heart issue.
What I've noticed is over the past few years, decade or two, people that were historically marginalized have had more power in legislation, and and they see the Christian nationalists, and particularly white males in our state, have seen their power slipping away. And
Yeah.
so they don't like that. And so they are countering it. And I get made fun of here when I say that, but that's exactly what's happening. And it's frustrating, and it's especially when it comes from my point of view. I was raised Southern Baptist and Republican here in my small town, and I was raised that God is love, love thy neighbor as thyself. And as a Republican household, Constitution is key, First Amendment, all of the amendment, like everything is important. But what I'm seeing now is the same people in my community that raised me to believe this way are not loving thy neighbor as thyself. They're wanting to go against the Constitution, rewrite it to suit their needs.
Yeah.
And so they all say that I've changed. And I'm like, well, I think maybe y'all are the ones that have changed. But, or, that's the thing. And it's very frustrating.
Yeah. Are you comfortable in your? I mean, you're in the town you grew up in. Are you comfortable there?
No, so when I have been traveling a lot with my book, but I am still a full-time school librarian, and I'm comfortable at work. Everybody is a friend. All of my coworkers are friends, and but I can't go grocery shopping in my community. I can't go when I go through drive-throughs because I won't go inside of a restaurant. I'm worried that if they notice it's me, I'm going to have my food spit in. My daughter is in the high school band and theater. And so I go to her events, and I kind of hide in the shadows so that I don't have people following me around with their cell phones and taking pictures and saying these awful things to me. So no, I'm not comfortable. I'm frightened. A lot of the rhetoric used against me is very scary, and they wish me harm, and they're not quiet about it. And so I do worry about. We have security cameras, and we've taken protective measures, but I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's do some question. We have some questions from the audience, and so let's do a couple of those, and then we'll talk about some more stuff.
Perfect. First up, our question comes from Catherine. You want to unmute and ask?
Hi, yes. I just wondered, I actually put this in the chat. Amanda, I admire your courage and stick-to-itiveness. Thank you so much for being there. Just wondering if you're getting any support from parents with kids in the schools that are served by your library.
yes. So I've only had one complaint at work from one parent, and go figure, she's friends with the people I'm suing. So, no, I don't. I feel completely supported by the parents of the students that I teach. And my students are 9, 10, 11. So they don't really, it's hard to gauge what they know and what they don't know. I don't engage in conversation with them about any of it. I just I've learned how to turn the conversation around. But I've gotten a lot of support from parents. And I always have to remember that it feels like it's my whole community against me. And really, it's probably like 10, 15%. It's just that they're so loud, and they post daily, and they're so mean and awful in public that it's hard to remind myself that I am actually probably supported by the majority of my community. It just doesn't feel that way.
Yeah.
But
Do you think a lot of
organized.
Sure. Go ahead,
I just
Catherine.
wonder if you don't have any organized support then. It's just like you get people telling you, but there's no organization behind it or anything.
Not within my community, but outside of my community, absolutely. The school librarian world, or I should say the librarian world in general, I get so much support from librarians, and I'm a member of several. A member of Penn America and Every Library and American Library Association and National Coalition Against Censorship. And I get support from so many people outside of my community, just not organized support within.
Is there a group is there a portion of your neighbors and your fellow community members who are just, I mean, you think maybe there's majority support? Are they cowed by the idea that supporting you will label them as something?
Yes, I had a few people early on that would try to go into these social media platforms and say this is not true, and they got targeted as well. And I do have, I'm going to be vague about this, but there is someone within my school system in a position of power that has been very personally supportive of me, and they found that out and they have targeted him as well. So people are just scared, and I try to understand that. I try so hard to understand that. It's not, I mean, I like to think that were the roles reversed, I would be on right there, but I have to move on with that line of thinking.
Yeah. Right. And I think we have
Next up,
another.
we have Deborah. Deborah, if you'd like to unmute and ask.
Sure. Hi. Thanks for taking my call. Amanda, you're really brave and you're working really hard. My question for you is, what would you consider to be your ultimate goal, your realistic ultimate goal? And what would you count as your successes so far?
So realistically, we're not going to be able to stop the banning of every single book that's challenged, realistically. And I recently heard Stacey Abrams speak at the Decatur Book Festival, and she said, we have to measure success and progress and not victories. So I am hoping my ultimate goal is to keep my public library open, because as you'll see, it is about the books, and it is about the marginalization and the squashing of stories and people, but it also goes even further into anti-library legislation that looks to defund libraries. So if we can keep the libraries open and have service, provide resources for the people that need them in our community, that would be a success. And right now they are trying to completely slash our budgets, and they've taken over our board of control now. And so realistically, I know I can't save every book. But successes, I mean, we had 9 anti-library bills in the Louisiana legislature last year, and we successfully defeated 8 of them. So that was a huge success, considering we have a dictator governor and we have an extremist supermajority in the House and Senate. We did really well. We have another legislative session coming up in March, but success is just keeping the library open and books accessible to the people that need them the most.
So I mean, and I was going to ask, are we winning the fight? Are we losing the fight? And I guess there's not a good answer, because there's, it's the battle that continues.
It's such a local fight too, because even though it's happening nationally and it's happening in locations all across the country, it's very local, these fights. So in some places you've seen success, and you've seen people go so overboard that the pendulum is switching back. Like in Florida, they're starting to win the lawsuits, and Ron DeSantis is starting to kind of dial it back a bit. And so we're seeing that it's just such local, it's mixed results in every state. So it's hard to say. And I think it will get worse before it gets better. But I think ultimately we will be successful. It's just going to take a few years. And what scares me, though, is that the damage that is being done to our authors and our students and our residents and the libraries will take decades to undo that damage.
Yeah. What always strikes me about is that when we're having these fights, that involve what an 8-year-old has access to and can read. That 8-year-old's only 8 years old for a short time. And so while we are having this fight that may go on for years, that, even if we ultimately win, there's the person who suffered in the process along the way. So I often ask about the book title, and I'm often told that the person says, the people in marketing came up with that, and I wasn't sure whether I liked it or not. Is this your title? So tell us about that librarian. What made you? Why does that resonate with you?
Well, so they were using my name. All the people in my town were Amanda Jones, Amanda Jones. And then once I filed the first lawsuit, they stopped using my name and they just called me That Librarian. So the title is me taking it back. So I took back the name. Now the second part of it, the fight against book banning in America, that did come from my publishing company. I don't know. I probably would have changed a little bit, but no, but That Librarian, I knew that was what I wanted the title to be from day one.
Yeah. Was it I'm again, I think I know the answer to this question. Was it a hard book to write?
It was actually very cathartic. And so, and I guess I was told I need to stop saying I'm not a writer. Actually, Peter Parnell told me that, the author of Entanglement X3. He's like, you have to stop saying that. You are a writer.
Yeah.
But I'm a reader first. And to me, it was just like writing a diary. And I was just venting my frustration out. But it was very cathartic writing it. And it was even more cathartic when I read the audiobook, because it's me on the audiobook.
Yeah.
So getting to say those words out loud was very cathartic. So it was healing in writing the book. I did have to bring up a lot of things I had forgotten about and dig through all my screenshots and notes.
Yeah.
And it was very cathartic. And I am very vocal about being in therapy and how important I think therapy is. And so I would work with my therapist on all of these things.
Right. Well, that is one question that really comes to mind, is how do you deal with the stress? I mean, it was clearly, when this blew up at the beginning, it was debilitating. It was horrendous. And you had to deal with your husband, your daughter, and your work. Yeah. The first year, I stopped eating and I couldn't, it was like a trauma response. And so I started losing chunks of hair from not eating, and I developed severe anemia, and I lost a lot of weight. And I was actually in and out of the hospital for 2 months due to complications of the anemia. I had to take a medical leave of absence. But it's better now. I'm physically okay now. But it's, each day is different. It's like a roller coaster. Like 2 weeks ago, I met Judy Bloom, and so I was up here. Saw that picture, yeah.
Yeah, and then I come back to my town and get called a groomer, and it's like goes back down here. So it's like, it's a roller coaster, and it's hard. It's never in the middle. It's like I'm having really great days, or it's really bad days, and it's just something. It's my way. It is what it is. But this is how I frame it in my head, is that this will be my life 3, 4, 5, 7, 8 more years. But for the people whose books that I'm trying to protect, that will be their life for the foreseeable future. And so I can deal with it for the next few years. It's fine. I mean, it's not fine, but it's perspective. I look at it as perspective.
Right. All right. We had another question from the room.
Yes, we did. Our very own Kate Karp.
Hi, that's Kate behind the cat. I've been looking forward to this talk ever since Mark announced it. Libraries and books have always been nearest and dearest to my heart. And this morning I was reading the LA Times and read about New Jersey having an anti-censorship law. And I'm sitting there, yeah, they added it to Illinois and I think to, was it Wisconsin or Minnesota? I always get the two mixed up.
Minnesota.
Um, I'm one, and then I'm listening to you, and my heart, along with I'm sure everyone else's, is breaking here, and my anger level has just gone up. How are you feeling about the legislation? Are you encouraged, or are you thinking polarization again, word of the year?
I'm encouraged. And I know a lot of the school librarians and the librarians in general in New Jersey that have been fighting so hard for this law, this legislation in New Jersey. And I'm so proud of them. And like, I'm so excited. And my friend Martha Hickson from New Jersey was there when the governor signed it into law yesterday. And I was just so proud. And the states that do those give me hope. And we actually in Louisiana have been working, we have copied New Jersey's and we keep trying to get one of our legislators to file. It's not going to happen, but we keep trying. And so maybe in a few years, maybe it will happen that we will have our own law in Louisiana. Um, I mean, you don't know unless you try. So we'll just keep trying, but it does give me hope.
Okay, thanks, Amanda. We got your back.
Thank you.
What's the law you're pursuing?
It's an anti-book banning law. Basically, I mean, it pretty much just backs up the Constitution. You would
Yeah, I was
think
going to
that,
say, what does it do
yeah,
exactly?
well, because each state has their own laws regarding public and school libraries. And so, and we rely on the Constitution in our arguments, but they're not really protected as such, which is why, we don't have a national library protection. And so we just have to rely on previous court precedent and things like that, and each state's fight. So my hope is that basically the law states that they can't remove a book based on, viewpoint discrimination and things like that. Basically the Constitution.
Right, yeah. I'm curious about the money motivation. I mean, I think it's on the surface, it's all very much the religious thing, and then the othering where we don't want those people influencing our kids, but at the there's sort of there's also this sort of thing that says we don't necessarily want our taxpayer money going to books, because goodness, why do people need this? They can go to Amazon, they can get stuff online, they can watch Netflix. So is that and I guess because of that, I don't know that it'll ever go away as an issue, but are you seeing that motivation?
That's a huge issue. And I always tell people that viewpoint is one of privilege.
Yeah.
Because you're able to go to Amazon and you're able to have Netflix. I look at, so just at my school alone, I mean, I think we send almost 50 students home with food for the weekend, or they wouldn't eat. Like those kids we're like 100% free lunch. A lot of our students, they don't have Amazon money. They don't have Netflix money, and a lot of them do, but it's widening. This attack on libraries is going to widen the gap with the haves and the have-nots, and
Yeah.
it's not fair to students who don't come from a household that they don't have the means to download a book or go buy a book from the local bookstore. They rely on the library, and not just for books though. Our libraries, we have programs, so many programs and helpful things that our libraries do for our community. Even the amount of people that rely on our library for Wi-Fi access is enormous. And so that's going to be some of the first things they cut, though, besides after the books. At our local library, we have a budget meeting in 2 weeks, and they want to cut audiobooks and videos and ebooks, and it's just widening the gap.
Well, and you said that there is a failed millage.
Well, our millage passed. So our millage passed by 162 votes.
Okay.
162 votes, or our public libraries would have been shut down.
Yeah.
Because 99% of their operating budget relied on that. However, we have an extremist control of our public library board, and so they are slashing the budget because they can. And they're putting the money into a surplus. And we know what they're going to do is then they'll pass a law that they can take the surplus for other parts of our government. So it's all a part of their plan to defund.
Yeah.
100 and our millage, it was we're a small town. I want to say it was like 3 or 4,000 versus 3 and 4,000. And then it was like 162 votes, like saved our library. It was a
Yeah.
lot of hard work too. A lot of hard work because the campaign to defund was all around wokeism and indoctrination, and the libraries are horrible. And it took a lot of work to get that millage passed by our community.
Yeah, I think it was nearby Lafayette that I read had the failed millage. Is that right?
Yes,
Remember over-
they had a failed millage and they lost millions in funding. And that's the same library system where the extremists in our state started. And they have successfully relocated the teen nonfiction section to the adult section. They've successfully banned several books. And they aren't even allowed to have displays at their libraries.
displays
No-
of any sort because
No controversial. So no Women's History Month.
that's
Black History Month?
controversial.
Oh yeah. They can't even have Cajun heritage displays.
In
And
Lafayette.
this is in Lafayette, the heart of Cajun country in Louisiana. So
I guess we can laugh at it, but it does seem incomprehensible. So what can we do? I know there's the chapter that toward the end has some suggestions. I think there's so many people in this room who are interested in doing something. And actually, I forgot, we have a question that came in to somebody who couldn't make it, but she wanted to make sure she got her question in. So maybe we'll start with that, Heather, if you're ready to offer us that
Yeah.
question.
Absolutely. This comes from Trisha, who says, I live in a very conservative county north of Pittsburgh, and our library is starting to see challenges to books. So far, there have been only a few, and they were not successful. Do you think it would be helpful to try and get on the library board in an attempt to fight these challenges?
oh, absolutely. If you're a library lover, try to get on your library boards of control and on your school boards if you can. Because that's we're seeing takeovers of school boards and library boards, and that's when they start getting these things passed. So if there are openings, absolutely try to get on your library boards. And even if it hasn't happened, it's very important to create a library alliance, a community alliance. And I don't mean Friends of the Library, like the fundraising arm of the library, a library support group. Ours is the Livingston Parish Library Alliance, and we have social media and we have a website that dispels, the truth and the misinformation and disinformation that are out there. But I say you develop a group of library lovers before it even hits, so that you're ready and you're prepared and know what to do. Because it just takes one person to upend everything to get it started. They'll post a page of a book out of context. And they'll say, oh, this book is in the children's section next to the Very Hungry Caterpillar. And they don't take the work as a whole, and they insinuate it's in places that it's not. And then before you know it, they turn into, it's the mob scene from Beauty and the Beast again. And so it's very important to go ahead and develop a group that is library lovers in your community and come up with a game plan.
Okay. And what else? What else can we do if we're not? So that it's an interesting thought because, obviously we have in my town, we have a library board, we have Friends of the Library. We have no movement toward, banning books. I'm in a privileged place where people believe in it, people love their library. But what can I do and what can people in the room do to help with the movement?
Well, first and foremost, always pay attention to your school board and your library board of control agendas in meetings and watch to make sure it's not happening because they like to sneak it in. But voting is very important. Make sure you're using the library. Download ebooks, download audiobooks, go and check out, apply, go visit the different classes and the clubs that they have and take advantage of those things and encourage other people to. There are a lot of local alliances and a lot of state alliances that you can help. I helped found Louisiana Citizens Against Censorship, but there's the Florida Freedom to Read Project. Utah reads freely, I think. Alabama Read Freely, Texas Freedom Fighters, Texas Freedom to Read. So you can donate money to grassroots alliances that are on the ground working in these local areas to help us fund these things. You can help people that are filing lawsuits with support. You can send letters of encouragement. I get so many letters, and I don't want to know how they get my address. I get so many letters of encouragement and things from people, and that helps keep me going. So if it's not happening in your area, find out who it's happening to and send them letters of encouragement. Because I'll tell you, I almost quit. Like I almost was at the breaking point. And I received a letter from a veteran named Bill, and I included this letter in my book. And that was the day I read that letter. And I thought, I cannot quit this fight. And so you never know how a word of encouragement will help. You need to pay attention to legislation. Even if you're in a state that's not currently like a hotbed for this, you email your U.S. legislators, your U.S. representatives and senators, and say, hey, we need to we need something nationwide. And you look at campaigns. If you look at campaigns, the United Against Book Bans is always running campaigns. Every library, and United Against Book Bans is part of the American Library Association. Authors Against Book Bans, We Need Diverse Books, National Coalition Against Censorship. There's so many organizations that are doing the work. And they always have please email this and sign this petition. Y'all can sign those too and help us.
Yeah. Yeah. What was the gist of the email from Bill?
So he is a veteran, and he wrote to me about all of the people that he's known in his life that are service members, and he talked about fighting for our country and how what I'm doing is not the same thing, but it's similar in a way that we're fighting for our country in different ways and not to give up. But it specifically talked about in this fight, you will feel deserted and like your friends have left you. And that was exactly what I was feeling that day. And how I had more people than I realized that were supporting me and that were behind me. It was a very beautiful letter.
Yeah.
Very beautiful letter. Yes.
Good.
Yeah, I'd love to jump in now and say we got another question from the room from Neil.
Hi, Amanda. First, I want to tell you I really appreciate you. And you've somewhat talked about this, and it was on my mind as you were talking anyway, that this kind of fight has happened at school boards across the country pretty similarly. And I remember probably a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I put a story in the paper about how national organizations basically go around to local boards and raise and develop candidates to promote their extremism. And is that happening here? And you touched on how Lafayette had their group behind them and it moved over to your community. And then the question I have is there hope that, as happened with school boards across the country, national groups to raise opponents to these extremists emerged and helped the school boards maintain their books and maintain their libraries? Could that happen in your case also?
Absolutely. So there are these groups. So our group, and I don't like saying their name because I don't like giving them, they get excited when I mention them. Yeah.
It's in the book.
Yeah. It's a local extremist group. They do work kind of with Moms for Liberty, but it's essentially like that, where they raise candidates, and funding, and they funnel the money, and they try to take over boards and everything. But then you see them, they overdo it, they overplay their hand, and they go too far. And so you've seen in places like Central Bucks, I think it's Pennsylvania, Central Bucks County, they had an extremist takeover, and the whole town got so mad that the next go around, they got them all out. And so we're seeing that a lot happen. You're seeing a lot of those groups that were raising money, like the moms groups that were raising candidates for school board and getting people on the board. There was pushback. So the next races, they did not win the seats. They were not winning as in such a high turnout because they kind of went overboard about it. There are groups out there like Red, Wine, and Blue and Defense of Democracy and Campaign for Our Shared Future, and other groups that are willing to help people that want to run. There are groups, and I'm blanking out on the name. There's an organization that'll help you if you're thinking about running, like what to do and what to say and how to do it. And we need more people to run. And I'm retiring in 6 years. And which is something I never thought I'd say, because I never wanted to retire. But I think I have to in about 6 years. And so I'm going to run. I hope that I can run for office. And I don't think that it's that I would necessarily win, but you have to get the conversation started. So you have to get the conversation started. And so even if I don't think I would win in my community, people have to push back and they have to run.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. We have another question from the room.
Yes, from Deborah. Come on down.
Okay, here I am again. So like everybody else in who's listening to you today, I have been following these issues a lot over the last several years, but I'm finding it really difficult because there's so much out there to get my bearings on how pervasive book bans, anti-book bans, just everything you've been talking about. How pervasive is this as an issue? So from your own perspective, from what you've seen, from what you've heard, from what you've experienced, how would you describe where you are in your where your community is? Is your community an outlier in these issues? Is it, what would you describe, if it's an outlier or somewhere on that end of the spectrum, what would you describe as a more general common situation that libraries are in with respect to these issues around the country?
It's so pervasive. Like there's I could list hundreds of library systems that are facing the same thing that we're facing as in my community. And I can name hundreds of librarians who are being targeted and harassed. It does seem to be more statewide in a red state, but I want to be clear that this is not just happening in red states. This is happening in all states. We tend to see a lot of the anti-library legislation is happening in like the Midwest and the South, Iowa, Florida, Texas, Missouri, Arkansas. It's so hard to say. We're so polarized right now, and it's which is why when we go and speak, our alliance goes and speaks out in our community. We try to tell them this should not be this partisan issue. Like libraries are for everyone. It should be a constitutional right. And we wear purple because we say red and blue makes purple, and we should all come together. And but it's, I mean, my community is pretty much like how it is all across Louisiana, with the exception of like New Orleans and Baton Rouge, the larger cities. I know that if you're not familiar with Kelly Jensen is a writer, is an author and former librarian. She works for Book Riot, and she puts out a weekly censorship roundup. And so every Friday I'll go and I'll read the weekly censorship roundup, and she highlights where all this is happening and all of the stories and how you can help and all of the things. And I really like PEN America's, and they do report yearly or twice a year, as does the American Library Association, and it dives a little deeper into like where specifically some of these hotbeds are, and it's just it's everywhere.
Yeah.
It's frustrating.
It's stomping out fires, but it's more than fires, isn't it? It's sort of, yeah, it's fighting blazes. And you know, I don't remember where I read this, probably in the book, but you said that everybody who is on the side of opposing books is of the Republican Party. Not all Republicans are against banning books, and you say it's a nonpartisan issue. So why is that? What's going on there?
Well, there is an extremist faction in the Republican Party, and I will say the majority of these do come from Republicans, but I'm very clear that it's the far right faction.
Yeah.
There are people, a lot of people in my community that are Republican that are against this. My parents, for example, are against book bans in any way, shape, or form, but they're Republicans. And it's this far right faction, and they're just so loud. But it's this, they're very well funded, and it's hard to defeat. When you look at, just for me, for example, in my community, my Library Alliance, we have no money. It's just community members showing up, and we're fighting against people that have deep pockets and connections with legislators, and fund these legislators' campaigns, and fund the campaigns of the judges, and they have deep pockets, and it's hard to combat that. But it's generally, my parents got really offended when I pointed out that all the book bans were coming from the alt-right Republicans, and my mom was like, I would never. And I'm like, but my point to her was, then speak out against the extremism in your party. You have to speak out. And I look at people in the Republican Party like Liz Cheney, who speaks out against it, and then they're vilified. They're vilified for it. So,
Yeah. So have you been doing many events, a lot of speaking, promoting the book?
Yes, so I'm still a full-time school librarian, and I have been gone every weekend since August.
Wow.
To book events, and I have 6 weeks off with nothing but virtual, but I generally teach all day, and then I usually do an interview and a webinar and a meeting, all three every day after school.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm really tired.
Yeah. Wow. So, and have you done a lot of, have you done a lot of speaking in person, or has it been mostly virtual?
No, I've been to 30 states this year.
Oh, wow.
In person. Yeah, I've been at 30 states, and I never say no to an interview or a request for a webinar or an interview or a podcast, because from reputable sources, because to me, again, I've been given a platform to make people aware, and if I was not using my platform, it would be a waste of a platform. And I am going to continue to speak out against this as long as I am asked to do so.
I would think that having that opportunity to go to speak to individuals who are probably on your side must be very gratifying to have gone through so much negativity, to then to have that, counter that with positivity.
It is. It really helps.
Yeah.
It really helps. Then I have to come back. But it really helps. And also, but it's also, I'll say this, going to all the different states and speaking in person events, it's traumatizing in its own way, because there's not a single event that I don't talk to at least one or two other people that cry and say, this is happening to me too. And that's really hard, because I try to tell them it's going to get better. I don't know that it is, because I have these positives from my book and from the platform that I have that they don't have. So I have things to look forward to that some of these people doing the fight and doing the work, they don't have the same opportunities. And so it's really hard, because I try to give words of advice, and sometimes all I can do is just hug them back and say, I'm sorry, and just be there.
Yeah. So what's next?
I just founded a nonprofit, another one.
Oh, how many organizations are you involved with?
A lot.
So what is this?
I just two librarians, two school librarians, and I just founded an organization called Librarians Building Libraries, and we have a website. It's called buildinglibraries.org, and we're actually Dr. Wasanga, who's a professor of an all-girls school in Kenya, reached out to one of us and said, my girls need a library at our school in Kenya, and so we're actually going to be bringing them thousands of books and build, like, they have a room and they have some older books, but we're going to let them select some own voices and some books for themselves and teach them how to catalog and organize and check books in and out to themselves so that they can have a self-sustaining library of their own. And we hope that after our first project, it'll be we'll be able to build upon that and do other schools. So yes, we did. I just founded that to give myself hope for something that's outside of the book banning realm, something else to work on.
Right. Yeah. Nothing to do with book banning, but the opposite, actually, isn't it? So that's wonderful. All right. Well, I think we're running out of time, but it's been a wonderful opportunity to hear from you and chat with you and learn what you're going through. And I hope we'll keep an eye on things. And I think there are a lot of people in this room who have expressed real thanks to you for what you're doing and a lot of empathy for what you're doing. And so hopefully you've gained some support, and hopefully we've made a little bit of dent toward progress and splashing a few drops on that fire that's burning. So, all right.
Well, thank you for having me, and we just have to keep up the good fight. So.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much. And we'll be back in January with our annual Word of the Year episode. So that is going to be a lot of fun. We'll have hopefully get the whole gang back to talk about the words that made 2024. Thanks very much, everybody.